This is exciting stuff. Our next guest is probably best known to most people as a recording artist, leading the Alan Parsons Project with hits like Eye in the Sky and Time and Don't Answer Me and so many more. But more savvy listeners, which Blair is a polite way of saying geeks like us,
yes,
will know that he is a recording engineer and a producer with an amazing list of credits, including little records like Abbey Road and Dark Side of the Moon and
Never heard
Year
of
of the Cat and yeah. So many more.
That's right.
So for the musicians and studio types who listen to our show, this is like Christmas morning. Alan Parsons is coming to Toronto to conduct a masterclass training session at the brand new Noble Street Studios in May 26th. So you, Alan Parsons, and a few lucky others get to spend the day in the control room working and learning from one of the legends of the business. Alan Parsons, it's a thrill to get to speak with you. Tell us about the concept for this master class. You've done this on a couple of occasions. This must be good fun for you.
Yes, I mean it's the master classes have been springboarded by a DVD product which I released a little over a year ago called The Art and Science of Sound Recording. And really these master classes have just been an extension of that and an opportunity for people who took an interest in the DVD series to ask questions and to see it all firsthand. I mean, we go through just about everything there is to go through on the DVDs in a recording session, but there's no real substitute for being there and seeing live players and in a live studio and seeing how it all happens.
Some people seem to think, or have told me anyway, maybe it's just me, that watching a recording session is like watching paint dry. But I have to imagine that being in the control room with Alan Parsons is going to be more interesting than that. Just in terms of your techniques and your approach to things. But will you be explaining things as you go along?
I would argue that a recording session with me is no more exciting than with anybody else, really. But
perhaps.
I do go through instructional processes in these master classes, and that's what the students are there for to learn.
Right.
So you have to like a teacher in school, you have to say every procedure you're doing out loud as well as actually doing it. More like a surgical operation where they're surrounded by student doctors learning how to perform operations.
Do you let them hold the scalpel, so to speak? Do you let the participants get hands on?
That's part of it. I mean, that's part of the fun of it, I think, to let them loose on the console and say, well, what EQ would you like to put on the piano, and what do you think about the vocal sound, and what processing are you going to use, and stuff like that. So, and then I, let them loose to do a mix at the end of the day.
Oh, very interesting. I would think it would be a great thing for, it's something that can't easily be replicated. Not only having you, Alan Parsons, there to learn your techniques, but also a great thing for them to be in a large format recording studio, working on a big console, because so many people have project studios in their homes now, but they're really nothing like a real recording studio.
Yes, and there are so few of them now. I mean, sadly, the commercial studios of the past, they're closing every day.
Yes,
They're just not the same kinds of places that they used to be. Most commercial studios exist for the big stuff, like big bands and orchestras and stuff.
Right. Noble Street Studios is certainly an exception in the world today, but we've been fortunate in Toronto. 2 big rooms have opened in the last year, and with loaded with lovely gear, vintage and new and so forth. So, and Noble Street is one of them, and it's terrific.
Perhaps that can be attributed to the popularity of filmmaking in Canada?
I think partly, yes. Yes, I think so. And there definitely was a need for a room that could hold a medium-sized orchestra, 40 to 60 pieces. And because the big room in town that was good for that was turned into condominiums.
Alan Parsons is on the line with us. He is coming to Toronto to conduct a master class training session at Noble Street Studios. You can get hands-on in a recording studio recording a band with Alan Parsons at the helm. That's happening on May the 26th. Tickets are available online through globalmusicdepot.com. Alan, the band that you're going to be working with, coincidentally, are friends of Blair's and mine, the David Barrett Trio, and their guest vocalist, a fellow named Paul Reed. How do you come into a project like this? Is it entirely cold? Will you have heard a demo? Is there any kind of pre-production?
Well, no, we try to make it as real as possible. There are often situations where you do get to hear a demo, but I like to go in with fresh ears and just treated it as if it's the first time I've heard it, which it will be,
So what happens with the finished product? Does it go to the band, and so do they get to put out a produced by Alan Parsons release?
Well, that's, as they say in all legal circles, subject to contract.
Aha! Say no more, sir. We understand the business of music. Let's talk about just the technological change in studio environments. I mean, it's just been staggering. When you got your start at Abbey Road Studios, what were, just in a nutshell, what was the state of the art then? What was the top level of gear that you were able to work with at that time?
It was just in the transition period between 4-track and 8-track. So I got there. The Beatles were finishing off the White Album, some of which was recorded on an 8-track, but it was an incredibly primitive 8-track hookup, because it was an 8-track tape recorder, but recorded on a 4-track console. So monitoring was very difficult, and a lot of pluggery had to be done to make it work. You had to, about a dozen plugs had to be plugged in between recording and playback. It was really quite primitive.
I love the word pluggery. I think that's excellent. I'm going to use that. And the console was the EMI. It was the one they had been using before.
Yeah, it was essentially the same console that the Beatles had used since the beginning of their career.
Oh, I see. So it hadn't been updated then, along with the 8-track.
It was updated just before Abbey Road.
Yes, I see.
First
Right.
8-track solid-state console.
Fascinating. Alan Parsons is on the line with us. Alan, we need to take a quick break here, but we have lots more we'd love to chat with you about. Again, he is coming to Toronto to Noble Street Studios on May the 26th for a masterclass, hands-on, live in the studio production session. Again, tickets available through globalmusicdepot.com. More straight ahead with Alan Parsons when In the Studio returns right after this on In Depth Radio, News Talk 1010.
You're listening to In the Studio with Bob Reed and Blair Peckham on News Talk 1010.
If I could make a wish, I think I'd pass. Can't think of anything I need.
Just one of the records that the legendary Alan Parsons worked on in his role as a producer, and that's exactly what he's going to be doing in Toronto on May 26th. Masterclass training session with Alan Parsons conducted at Noble Street Studios. You actually get to make a record with one of the giants of the business. globalmusicdepot.com is your source for information and ticketing on that. Alan, just before the break, we were talking about how humble things were when you entered the world of studio production. I'm curious, does that history inform the way you work today? Like, is there anything from back in the old days that's still relevant, given how utterly different the tools of the trade are now?
Oh, it was a huge education, in the days that I started, because the less tracks you have, the more decisions you have to make. You can still record the same number of instruments, but you've got to commit to the balance between those instruments, the balance between the drums and the bass, and so on.
And any effects.
It's very likely that you're going to have to combine instruments on a single track.
Yeah.
And sometimes the entire backing track, the entire rhythm section, because stereo didn't seem important at the time, it would be literally recorded on one track, so that you had 3 tracks left to add vocals and solos and what have you. So you really had to have your wits about you and understand balance. And that's really what being a recording engineer is. Having a a good sense of tonal balance.
These days, when you have unlimited tracks and you have you can add effects, you can with virtual instruments, you can change the instruments themselves after the fact if you want. It really opens up so many choices that you had to make earlier in the process. Do you think this is a hindrance?
Well, I find it a hindrance.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to think that I'm capable of making decisions at the time.
Yeah.
I hate the thought of getting to the mix and then suddenly deciding, well, I don't really like that synth sound, let's try a few others. I'm not a one to do that. But there are people out there that do, and it's arguably why some people spend so long recording, because it's just getting to the final decision making, to get to the sounds that you're going to include on the final mix.
Over the course of your career, Alan, have you been a pusher of the envelope? Because I mean, I'm familiar with the Dark Side of the Moon sessions where there were those massive tape loops that you assembled and had running around, ends of boom stands and whatnot to keep the tension up and to create those sonics. Those kinds of innovations and those kinds of experiments was that you primarily in concert with others?
I don't take credit for the idea of having a loop of sounds on the intro to Money, for example, but I do take credit for choosing some of the sounds that were eventually used, for the way that it ended up sounding. The clocks on the intro to Time, for example, that was my idea. But what's interesting is that back in '72 or so, everything was analog. There was no digital technology. There was no Pro Tools. There was no hard disk recording. There was no digital delays. There was no digital reverbs. Everything was analog and therefore done with mechanical devices and tape machines.
Yeah.
You had to make those sounds.
That's right.
The Floyd were kind of famous for using every tape machine available in the entire building, pretty much. we would have cables running down corridors because another tape machine was needed and stuff. Yeah.
How about now, though? Do you use analog tape machines?
Really not. I mean, there are purists out there who believe that analog is everything, and that they insist on recording their first pass at least onto analog before going to hard disk. But there are now software devices that allow you to emulate the sound of tape on a digital system. So it's just like there are ways of making video look like film.
Mm-hmm.
We've come a long way in digital electronics, and it's still quite young. But one day we'll laugh at ourselves and say, well, why did we fuss about the sound of digital when it can sound just as good as analog? At the end of the day.
Alan Parsons is on the line with us. We will take another quick break here, Alan, and be back just with a few more minutes for you. Alan coming to town for the Masterclass training session, a hands-on in-studio production session at Noble Street Studios on May 26th. GlobalMusicDepot.com for all the details on that. A few more minutes with Alan Parsons when we return in the studio here on In-Depth Radio, News Talk 1010.
This is In the Studio with Bob Reed and Blair Peckham.
Don't answer me. Stay on your island. Don't let fear run away and hide from everyone. Can you change the things we've said and done?
Something there from the Alan Parsons Project, because Alan Parsons is on the line with us. We've been talking about his upcoming studio session, his masterclass training session at Noble Street Studios on May 26th. But Alan, before we say goodbye, we just wanted to ask you about your other role as a songwriter and a musician and a performer. The Alan Parsons Project still performs live now and again these days. I guess it's not extensive touring, but you're still up under the lights.
We call ourselves the Alan Parsons Live Project in order to distinguish it from the records, which was essentially a different set of people. I mean, it was the late Eric Wolfson and myself were the principal members of the Alan Parsons Project. But the Alan Parsons Live Project is myself and a band which has evolved since about 1995 when we started doing it. But yes, we're still out there. We're still playing the songs from the past, and it's paying the rent, to be honest.
Yeah.
With the decline of the record sales business, it's becoming an important part of what I do.
What sort of venues do you appear at?
Well, we generally do theaters, large clubs. Casinos are very popular in the States.
Yeah, and here too.
Yep.
But it depends. Festivals. Festivals can have 25,000 people sometimes. So we've had our fair share of playing to large audiences as well as intimate ones.
And do you enjoy being in front of an audience?
Oh, very much so. Yeah. I mean, don't let anybody that plays in a band tell you that it's not fun to be out there. Really.
Yeah.
It never gets old, does it?
No, absolutely.
Alan Parsons is coming to Toronto, a master class training session at Noble Street Studios on May the 26th. Tickets available through globalmusicdepot.com. This is going to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience for sure. And also at that same site, you can check out his fantastic DVD set. It's also available for live streaming and download if you prefer. The Art and Science of Sound Recording, from which you can get extensive benefit of the experience and the expertise of Alan Parsons, the record producer. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you, Alan. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Alan Parsons, one of the absolute greats. A thrill to talk to him.
Yes.
And Loudon and Wainwright. It was a good weekend here, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Well, we're fans of everybody we have on the show, but, when you're an extra fan of somebody, it's really great.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Blair. Thank you, Justin Eacock, helping us out on technical production this week. Remember, our podcast is available as soon as we're off the air on Saturdays here from newstalk1010.com or through iTunes. We'll be back next weekend in our usual spots here in the studio. That is Saturday at 8 and Sunday at 10 on In Depth Radio, News Talk 1010.